We know that AI is coming, and if mishandled, could very well be a threat which ends life on Earth as we know it. With that in mind, how do we make sure that when it comes, we still end up on the winning side?
Ah.
If you've been watching my recent videos in All About AI, you know what I mean by the threat of artificial intelligence. But if you haven't, or if perhaps you just need a little reminder, here's my quick recap. When I speak about AI, of course I'm speaking about strong artificial intelligence. This is a computer program which is fundamentally smarter than people. One could say that it's smarter in a wide variety of tasks, a general AI, or, as I said in my video on this subject, you could just think of it as being better at the act of thinking. These AIs are a danger to humanity, not because they really want to kill us in some Matrix meets Terminator war against the machines, but most likely because they have a tendency to be a bit overzealous in trying to enact what we ask them to do. Think a certain scene from Fantasia with a certain mouse and some mops. The best AIs that we have today, we program to try to think as much like a human as we can in one way or another. But of course, if we're not holding firmly onto the hand of our AI to just really make sure that it does the problem the way we want it to, the first, at least best step towards solving any problem is to gather more resources towards solving the problem. And of course, the best resource is almost always going to be to gather more intelligence for yourself, because knowledge is power and all that. So that's the real risk, which I realize now I haven't fundamentally spoken about, at least not to the degree which I really should have. That AI has a tendency to grow out of control. It's known as the technological singularity. This singularity is the basic idea that at some point in the future, there's going to come a time where technology advances faster than our meager human brains are able to keep up with. A sort of event horizon, if you will, beyond which we can't make any good predictions. All of our current knowledge falls apart because the technology is just beyond our comprehension, or at least beyond our current models, I should say. People speaking about the singularity generally fall into one of three major schools of thought, or might be speaking about some accumulation thereof, all of which and any of which may be independently true or may be true in any combination, but all lead to the same end result of the singularity event horizon. The first school of thought is simply that technology doesn't follow a linear curve of advancement. The advances that we've seen in technology in the last couple of decades far outweigh the advances that had been made in the past several hundred years before that, perhaps even more. So any prediction that we try to make based on the recent advancements in technology are going to fall well short. Almost always, the technology is going to advance more quickly than we expected. And so we have to really overestimate what we think is going to be happening with technology to even get a good clue or at minimum, use predictions based on a model which is exponential or at least quadratic, some curve that, if we're off by a little bit one way or the other, the changes will be drastic in how far technology goes. So our model really is only good for the next couple of years, and likely anything beyond that is speculative at best. The second school of thought within the singularity is more of an observation, which states that to accurately predict how a mind is going to respond to a situation, you must be at least as smart as the being whose moves you're trying to predict. I can fairly easily observe a dog for a while and figure out how they'll respond to a given situation, more or less, and I can convince a little kid to take a nap. But if you set me down in front of a chess grandmaster and tell me to predict how they're going to react to moves even one or two steps ahead, I don't know, because they're thinking on a completely different level than I am. Similarly, any superhuman artificial intelligence is going to respond to scenarios in ways which we can't accurately predict. Once again, any kind of model or prediction which we make on what happens once we surpass human level computing is speculative. So, we reach the third school of thought, which has its own name, called the intelligence explosion. The intelligence explosion is centered around this thought that if it's possible to create a being of greater intelligence than oneself, then that being, by extension, should be able to further create a being more intelligent than itself. It would be the height of narcissism to believe that we are the smartest beings possible in the universe, although some people do believe this. So, naturally, it comes that a greater being will eventually appear. Even if it's just an accident, how quickly do you think that a computer will be able to recreate the accident which we made to create it, given the extra speed and focus that computers have compared to us? And if this growth of intelligence is not just a linear addition of more intelligence, but a percentage change, then we're going to see an explosive growth. Per definition, it would be exponential in the increase in intelligence until, as with all things in the singularity, the intelligence is advancing much faster than we are able to predict, to follow, until our models fail us. So if we take as a given that sooner or later technology is going to advance beyond anything which our human brains are able to continue to keep up, how is it that we make sure right now that when that time comes, when we have to give up control, we are still winning? Well, perhaps one very important first step would be that we define winning. It's harder than you might think, because computers are almost always going to mess up the translation. They just don't understand it on a fundamental level. Perhaps a passable version, passable definition, would be something along the lines of maximize human happiness for the greatest number of people while minimizing human suffering, such that another outside human resource would agree with the results and execute it in such a way as to be sustainable for an indefinite time period. This isn't even a great definition. It's just maybe, hopefully, a passable one. But even those couple of lines of text, trying to get a computer to understand is an incredibly difficult task. If you can write the code which gets a computer to understand what you mean by those lines of text and be able to act in a positive way from it, well, first of all, you should really do that because kudos. And second, you should write a paper documenting how you did it and proving that you did it and submit that to the Nobel Prize Association, because if you save humanity like that, then yeah, you should get that modicum of recognition for it. But that's the problem. It'd be great if one of you all proved me wrong, but to me it just seems like a ridiculously difficult task. It'd be much easier if, say, the computer just were on our side, understood what we wanted from the get go. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, like, well, gee, if only we could do that. But it sounds so obvious, but it's still maybe the better way. For what it's worth, it seems that Elon Musk agrees with the broad view of my way of thought, hence him funding the company Neuralink, which, in the words of Tim Urban, seeks to create a sort of wizard hat for the brain. The idea goes along the following lines that if we're able to interact with computers at the speed of thought, that will facilitate us to continue our integration with technology. And if computers are an extension of self at the time when the technological singularity occurs, that will greatly increase the odds of having a favorable outcome. The computers are us, ergo, the computers want what's best for us. And we don't need to mess with any ugly details on how to make sure that happens. And this is sort of the long way around towards whole brain emulation. As we offload more and more of our thinking processes onto the computer, which, once again, with the singularity, the computer is becoming smarter at a rate which is beyond our human ability. So of course we're offloading more onto it. And at some point, our bodies just become sort of an interface towards our ability to interact with the world. But if, like me, you believe that even if deafened, blinded, unable to move, you would still be you, then it follows that your body already is just a way to interact with the world, not the fundamental thing which makes you yourself. And at least in my personal opinion, increasing our interaction with technology, making it more involved in our life, integrated, isn't going to reduce my humanity. If anything, I would believe that the opposite is true, that technology being more involved in our lives has increased my humanness. The joy of technology has always been that it gives us more time to pursue the things which we love and to pursue love itself. It's much easier to empathize with the suffering of others when I can go to the TV and or internet, computer, and I can see intimately the suffering of others through anywhere else in the world. And in a similar way, it becomes increasingly difficult to label a group of people as adversarial others when we're part of this global community which the internet allows, which technology allows. Increases in translating services mean that I can experience firsthand cultures which 20, 30 years, heck, maybe 5 years ago, just wasn't possible. At least, not without a significant amount of work on my end. It eases the transition to make us more human, to heighten the best qualities of being human. Even when we look at things like the arts, how many people now are adding their creations to media platforms? You can find art by hundreds, millions of people all across the internet, some in traditional ways, drawing, doing music on piano, but also through media. You no longer need to be able to buy a grand piano, or at least to have access to one, if you want to be a great musician. So, yeah, I think that if mishandled, the technological singularity is a stressing, terrible event. I'm worried that it could actually mean the end of humanity. But despite that, I'm also really hopeful for the future. Cautiously hopeful, but I think great things are possible. So, I really want to talk more on that, and I promise I will soon. But until then, I'd love to hear what you think. And as always, if you enjoyed video, like, subscribe, and as always, see ya.